Hello, welcome to week number 6. This is your instructor, Dr. Gabriel Science. This week we'll be taking a look at research ethics, mostly at research ethics, and we'll have a little bit of academic writing there towards the end. So, research ethics, to put it simply, is a set of bits of information that you need to know or you should know before doing any research so that you can be careful about people's rights. As people, it's important to respect them and make sure that we do no harm or avoid as much harm as humanly possible when doing research. There has been a history of research in psychology and in other fields that was performed in unethical ways that hurt people or that unnecessarily put them at risk, and obviously that is something that we do not want to fall into doing. So we're going to cover just a couple simple concepts in research ethics that you should be aware of. Realistically, the videos for this week I think are going to be a little bit shorter. There are 5 of them this week, but none of them should be super in depth. But they're still very, very important topics. And then at the end, we'll look at academic writing. Every week or every other week, we're trying to put together a little bit more of that final paper for the end of the semester. And so this week, we'll take a look at formatting, the style that we use in psychology and a couple other humanities is called the American Psychological Association style or APA style. So we'll give you a little bit more information on how to get started with that. The sections this week first and I'm really proud of how I managed to name these first couple ones, beneficence and benefits. So that's what good can research do? Confidentiality, consent, and coercion. So avoiding doing something bad to people, put simply. Deceptions and debrief. So in psychology, a lot of times we need to lie or omit information so that we can achieve data of the proper type that we're looking for. So how can we do that in an ethical way? At-risk populations, that's going to be taking a look at what sort of people do we have to be extra careful about doing research on, and what can we do to be extra careful with them. Finally, we'll have that section on APA, academic writing. So let's get started with beneficence and benefits, doing good or good enough. So beneficence is the idea that in research you should try to do good and avoid doing any harm, which means that you want to minimize any risk that your research does. Now, importantly, you're never going to have research that is totally without risk. And so when you do have harm or risk to your participants, it's important that you outweigh that with benefits. And there's a couple things that we can talk about to those points. But in order to illustrate the point, I've got a couple different situations that could cause risk or could elicit risk or harm to your participants that you may not be aware of, and how we should deal with those situations. So first of all, research that just involves surveys or tests. You can imagine that that sort of research is not particularly risky. There's not very much harm to it. So what do we need to be careful of there? You might think that there are no risks and there are no harms there. Well, no matter what, you're always going to have a risk of hurting someone's privacy. What do we mean by that? Well, as part of research, we want to make sure that we maintain people's privacy because we don't want to oust their information to the public. Like psychologists, researchers have this agreement with the people that they're researching that they won't divulge things to other people. If you tell a researcher as part of a study that you do drugs, they are not going to tell someone else unless they believe that you are putting yourself in really, really immediate danger. You're putting someone else in immediate danger. Sometimes psychologists do need to do research on people who are doing things that are illegal, but just in a general day-to-day situation, if you ask someone, hey, what grade did you get on that test? That person probably doesn't want that information coming out, being told to everyone in the whole world. And so there's always going to be this privacy aspect. And so, in most cases, when we have very simple research that doesn't involve anything dangerous, privacy is going to be what matters. And now, all research is going to have privacy situations, but some research is going to have some amount of harm. For example, experiments involving electric shocks. Let's say that you're trying to see whether electric shocks can teach people to play soccer more quickly than no electric shocks. So that's going to fall under the category of minor discomfort, or anything that's going to be a minorly discomforting thing. Now be aware that a survey or a test could cause discomfort. If a survey has questions that might be slightly concerning or it might be bothersome, if a test takes a very, very, very long time, you may imagine that people who take like med school entrance exams or med school completion exams sometimes pass out because the tests are so tough. So any situation where you're going to have some amount of discomfort, maybe some potential risk, but not a whole lot, you're going to want to be careful there. Of course, you're going to want to minimize the risk. So there's companies that develop electric shock machines that are super totally safe. But even in those situations, you might avoid having participants who have heart conditions or something like that. You might be clear and tell the participants of what's going on. And then we have truly difficult situations where has a good chance of happening, or when you're dealing with a topic that's very rough. Say, for example, you are asking questions about trauma or trauma that people have had, being sexually assaulted in any way, or physically assaulted, or any sort of trauma, mental or physical. That's going to be something you're going to want to be very, very careful about. And so, in this situation, like the others, you're going to want to minimize your risk in any possible way. For example, if you know that the situation may cause mental trauma to a person, it might not be a good idea to have a therapist just on standby, ready. And another thing is we always want to make sure people can leave the study at any time without having to say why, just because if they want to leave, if things become too real for them, they can leave and there's no problem there. And so the aspect of beneficence here is going to be, is the research that we're doing important enough? Are we going to learn something from this? Are we avoiding as many possible risks and harms as we can? And so, just to restate, if you have research that may cause psychological distress or physical harm, the concept of beneficence is going to really hold you to, can we avoid that as much as possible, and can we benefit as much as possible from this? Um, if you're doing research that might kill somebody, it's really not going to be possible for the research to be that important that it would qualify for beneficence. But if you're doing research about a particular drug, and say you give half of the people the drug and the other half of the people you don't give the drug, is that a situation where you're hurting some people? Maybe you're hurting the people who give the drug, maybe you're hurting the people who don't give the drug. One of the ways people get around that is by, at the end of the study, everyone gets the drug, and so everyone still gets to have a chance to have that drug. Um, if it's like a new psychological thing that you're trying to help people out with, and the people who do get the drug may get free counseling or access to something that would help them in case the drug causes psychological distress in any way. So we've kind of already talked about this, but the benefits in research should always outweigh the harms and the risk. And one thing that's important to talk about with benefits is kind of one thing I've already mentioned. Is you want to make sure that benefits are not only something that are reasonable, but more importantly that they are equitably distributed. So think about it this way. Like I said, if you're doing a study where two groups of people are being tested and one of the groups gets a drug and the other one doesn't, it's not a very good idea to never give the other group the drug. And so if there's this benefit that like it could be a life-saving drug, then everyone deserves the chance. Everyone should be giving the drug at least eventually. And you should just use tests or some other reading to identify whether or not the drug is working, or to identify how the drug is affecting the participant. To put it simply, if there's benefits to your study, it's important that the benefits be equally distributed, everyone has a chance to get them, and also that the benefits aren't something that is prohibitive. Say, for example, you're going around and you're going to talk to homeless people, and you offer homeless people a special type of drink that could help them survive longer out in the wilderness. In that situation, you want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get that drink and not just some group of the people that you're researching. And so when you're doing research, it's important to consider what benefits there are in your research, not just for scientific benefits, but also benefits for your participants, and weigh those benefits against the risks and potential harms to identify whether you classify for the beneficence principle, that you're doing more good than harm. Okay, so we'll talk about these very, very related topics to these in the next section, so stay tuned.